Do we rescue animals or do they rescue us? This is the question we are going to contemplate today on the show. Welcome back, my friends, to the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast and to another UNCORK conversation, my absolute favorite kind of conversations. And I want to welcome back to the show somebody I had a long time ago. I want to welcome Natasha McKenty to the show. Natasha, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's going to be great. So hold on. For those of you who don't know Natasha, and if you live in the Waterloo region where I live, you know Natasha. But just in case you live in the UK or Singapore or other places where people listen to this podcast, you might not know who Natasha is. So let me explain a little bit about Natasha. So Natasha is a passionate and powerful storyteller. And she's driven by a deep desire to create content that leaves a lasting impact. Her experience in television broadcasting, print media, media relations has built and strengthened her storytelling ability. She is an active player in her local community, and she enjoys creating opportunities to elevate voices and shine a light on their cause in the work that she does. Her success and impact is energized and emboldened by her ability to intuitively understand the needs of others and apparently to understand the needs of animals, which is something we're going to talk about today. She genuinely cares about what she does and the stories she chooses to write and the people that compel her to write them. And she inspired me to write as well, which Natasha may not really realize. So what I want to do to get things started, and this isn't really part of the conversation, but I want to read a section from my new book called UNCOMMODiFiED that Natasha and some other provocateurs inspired me to write. When I first encountered Natasha on my podcast, we recorded an episode. I know it's hard to believe, Natasha, but it was February of 2022 when we recorded that last episode together. Time flies, doesn't it?
Wow. Yeah.
Crazy. And that episode now has become one of the most listened to episodes in all of the episodes that we've put out. So there's something magical on that. And I'm sure if you haven't listened to it, you're going to want to read it or you're going to want to listen to it. But let me just read a section of this book that was inspired by you, Natasha, and some other provocateurs in my life. The UNCOMMODiFiED are energized by fear. I want to be clear, the UNCOMMODiFiED get afraid, scared, and even terrified. Of course, they have insecurities and are fearful of things, but it's what they do with that fear that makes them so UNCOMMODiFiED. They constantly challenge themselves and others to turn the negative energy of their fears into positive forward momentum. They know that being brutally honest with themselves and others about what scares the shit out of them is the only way to break free from those fears. Pretending we are not afraid in a bid to build the confidence of others is an unwise strategy. People see right through that, and they'll see right through you. The terror in your soul is displayed on your face and heard in your voice. But here's the secret. We are actually energized by our fears when we face them head on. When we allow others to see us honestly engage our fears, they see that we are just like them, humans who get afraid, but we also demonstrate that we do not need to be paralyzed by those fears. Here's another lesson I learned. You will never eliminate all the fear, so you must do it scared. If you get past the fear, you will find the rush. Remember, baby steps. The first step is the hardest. Focus on where you are, get your eyes on something inspiring, and just do it. It will get easier. If you want to let your fears energize you, listen to episode number 77 of the UNCOMMODiFiED podcast, entitled Blow Your Fears Away, The Secret Power of Your Nervous Farts. In this UNCORK conversation, Natasha McKenty, media specialist, television broadcaster, news writer, and fear facer, and I explore our terrors and tears. Natasha shares her personal and professional journey from being terrified of crowds and speaking in public to being in front of crowds and the camera and going public for the sake of others. Now it's your turn. Be energized by your fears and use them to move forward.
Wow.
Thanks for inspiring that section of my book, Natasha, because your conversation that we had 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, was absolutely inspirational to me and countless others that I've heard from over the years. And I just want to thank you again for coming on and sharing so vulnerably about your own fears. And of course, we're not going to be talking about fears today so much, but I just wanted to thank you for the inspiration you've been to me and others, and thanks for helping me get beyond some of my fears. And one of the biggest fears was trying to get this book out in my life. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome for my verbal diarrhea.
Listen, you know what? It is a gift that some have better than others, and I think I have that gift as well, and maybe that's why we like to chinwag together. So I appreciate it. Okay, so what are you up to, by the way, professionally these days? Because I think you've gone through some career changes.
Yeah, so I guess the last time we spoke, I was writing for an aviation publication, which to me was already a major stretch, not something I thought I could ever accomplish, yet do well, which I hope I did. Um, and now I'm travel writing. So, I have this like whole bucket list of things that I feel like I need to do, and everything that I do feels urgent for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know. I feel like I've always thought that my life is going to be extremely short because the people that I have loved most in life have unfortunately passed away very young. My father was 49,
Wow.
and my grandmother, who raised me pretty much, was 53, and my dad's sister was 56. So I have this urgency to live.
Wow.
So I think we probably talked about this in
Yep.
my previous interview as well. Like, I don't, I'll spend 2, 3 years in a certain place, and then it's time for me to find, to check off the next box. And so there's many things I always wanted to do, but one of them was to be a travel writer. I just was always researching it and looking into it. And is it possible? Can you make a living? What would that look like? The ability to use my skill set to travel and to see the world and, just to understand different cultures and history. And I do that I learn by doing, not by reading in a book, which is ironic because I write.
Yep.
It just kind of, I don't even know how, just fell in my lap. So I'm very grateful. I'm very new to it. It's only been 4 months. I'm learning a lot, but thankfully the aviation background helps a lot too. So I have that language and I have that understanding of that side of the industry already, but there's a lot to learn and I'm loving it.
That's great. I get a kick out of following you on social media because there's just always something new coming down. There's a great post. And now because you're a travel writer, it's like where in the world is Waldo, but now it's where in the world is Natasha. I'm like playing the game along with everybody else. So I love what you do and I love the passion that you do it with. And that's really the genesis of this conversation today, because you and I have stayed in touch over the years after we first connected, and we've chatted about different things going on in our life. And we chatted a while ago about something you got involved in. And I really felt there was something really powerful about the conversation we had, and I want to share it with my listeners. So listeners, this is what's going to happen. And this is, by the way, this is my Christmas gift to you, because this episode was going to air just prior to Christmas 2023. So hopefully as you listen to this, you take some of these thoughts into Christmas. But of course, because this is an uncorked conversation, we always want to kick it off with a drink together. So what are you drinking today, Natasha?
I'm drinking red wine, some Cab Sauv, bread and butter.
That's a good one. I'm going to drink a Lake of Bays IPA. This is a 90 calorie. This is because, I'm getting ready for Christmas and I'm already got, my man boobs are already far too out of control. So I'm going with a 90 calorie IPA today. So it's under strict orders from my wife.
I'm happy to say there's no caloric intake on my bottle here, so
Beautiful.
That means it's 0.
Zero's good. Go with 0.
Zero.
I'm going 90,
Doesn't
which is better than a regular IPA that's like way too many calories. All right, let's kick this off. So here's the question again we're going to explore. Do we rescue animals, or do animals rescue us? More specifically for this conversation, do we rescue dogs, and do they rescue us? So, Natasha,
And
tell us.
mine hears you.
I know, by the way, if you hear this jingling in the back in the recording,
yeah.
it's not like no one's got Santa bells on. Maybe the dog does, though, because there's a dog is in the background, and I can hear the dog every once in a while, which is just killing me. It's so awesome. So we're going to make this dog a star today. So listen, how did you get into this journey of rescuing dogs? Did you find it? Did it find you? How did this all happen?
As long as I can remember, I've had animals in my home. I don't want, I couldn't, it's not a home without them. I think it came from my father, who, he was a cowboy. He had, a barn full of animals, a house full of animals, and often he had horses, so he would go to the live auction, and they would be horses that were being sent to slaughter, basically. So he would rescue them. They had all kinds of issues and ailments and behavioral problems, and he loved it. He loved them. He loved, giving them a second chance. So that's what I was raised around. So that just becomes natural when that's what you see, right? so I always seem to go, I have 3 dogs. One has neurological issues. The other was basically left for dead on the streets of China. She was attacked, and her intestines and everything were pulled out, and so she has extreme fear. She's mostly under the bed.
Wow.
She's a Papillon and a Pomeranian mix, so she's about 9 pounds. So after I got her, my sister had sent me a post on Facebook about Pixie, which was my first rescue from China, and then I started following the site. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but a ban was implemented in Canada for international adoption.
No.
And that was last September. So following this site, I saw that hundreds of dogs were being brought into Canada to try to beat the ban. And they were looking for people to volunteer to either help transport these dogs to foster homes or to foster them. And we didn't know for how long. So when we volunteered to foster, they didn't have any, because there were so many dogs and not enough to adopt them, we could have them for months. So I thought I would take 1 or 2, and I ended up with 4 rescues from China that I knew nothing about, and hoped to God they were going to mesh okay with my zoo, because I have 3 dogs and 2 cats and a hedgehog.
Oh my gosh.
And 3 children.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so I just brought them into my home and hoped for the best, even though, I was forcing them in the door because they'd never been in a house in their lives. They were just, straight from the streets to a monastery that had them caged until they had a flight to Canada. So they were, a work in progress.
Wow. So you come from this is part of your DNA, your heritage. You talk about your dad rescuing animals. I get the sense that just in seeing you and reading the kind of things that you write, that you have a bit of a rescuer nature, probably beyond dogs. You probably are just you are a rescuer of humanity, probably, as well as a rescuer of dogs and a rescue of the humanity in yourself. That I get that sense that there's a connection in this journey for you.
Yeah, I mean, it must be from my parents. It must be from the things I experienced as a child. I don't know, but I find fulfillment in helping and in bringing a spotlight to the stories of those who use, past adversity and hurdles that they've gone through to use that as their power to create better and good in the world. So I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly probably just as jaded and as broken as the next person, but I do find a lot of fulfillment in helping.
Yeah. So when you bring these dogs into your house, I mean, tell me what that journey is like for you, your family, and for the dogs. Like, is this an instantaneous sort of adjustment for them? Is this take months and months and months? And what's that period look like? And if other people were going to get into this journey somehow of maybe rescuing an animal, it's interesting because my daughter, her now fiance boyfriend at the time, he had a dog that was staying with his ex and needed to come to their home. And my daughter's never had a dog before. And she was at first like, I don't know if I want a dog. And I was like, oh, just wait. It's going to be amazing. So anyway, Sammy came to their house, and Sammy's got some social anxiety and some issues. And my daughter has just like fallen in love with Sammy. Now, I feel bad for Sammy because he now wears a bow tie. Okay, he's got a little bow tie that he's got to wear that my daughter's got on him. And he's a big gold, and he's awesome. He's got a little bow tie. But when Melissa, my daughter, just recently went away with my wife to Punta Cana, the dog pined at the door every day for her, even though they've just connected. But there's this instant bond, and that is a powerful thing. So, but it's complicated because he's got some problems and he's working it out, and he's probably a little bit like I was when I was a kid, a little bit of a problem child trying to figure out, don't poop on the floor there, it's a problem. What happens when these dogs come into your house? Is this a smooth, wonderful, amazing Disney transition, or is this hell wars from beyond?
It depends. I mean, I had 4 different dogs with 4 different issues. There was one that had burns all over his body. So, I mean, hot water, I'm assuming when I did some research, was scalding water was what burned him. He took longer to make eye contact or allow anyone to touch him or come, like even follow you or come to you when you put your arms out, because, I mean, humans only caused him harm. But, and I know that you and I talked about this when we did the pre-interview, animals teach us such valuable lessons about healing and letting go.
Yeah.
And I think I take more out of rescuing them than maybe they take from me, because it's so easy to hang on to the past and to, hold a grudge about the things that have wronged us or the people who have hurt us. And I only had them from, 6 weeks to a little over 2 months in the one I kept. But in that time frame, so much happened in these dogs. They went from, just not eating and not not sleeping because there was no routine in their lives ever. And suddenly, here they were in this strange space, and they suddenly were playing and running together and eating and sharing, and there was no growling, there was no fighting over any of the treats or the food. They learned to live together, and they learned to be touched, they learned to be loved, they learned to walk on a leash really quickly. And I think even for me there was a fear of what that would look like. So the one that I kept, she actually was in the first week she got away. And it was pretty scary because I didn't know how bonded we were at that point, and I didn't know where the heck she would go and if she would just keep running and running. So she was found up the street. She had tied herself around a tree, and so we found her, and the Humane Society had been called to come get her because the people who found her, she didn't have a tag or anything on, so they just called the Humane Society. And so when they came and I showed up, I had to prove that she was my dog, and I had no proof.
Oh my gosh.
So all I had was a passport that she came with from China. Anyways, this was probably, I don't even know, like within the first week of having her. And when they let go of the leash, she jumped into my arms, I was sitting on the ground, onto my lap, into my arms, and just buried herself in me. And I remember the woman from Humane Society going, "Okay, it's your dog." So I was pulling out photos on my cell phone to be like, "Look, I have 100 photos of her. This is my dog." And she was like, "I don't even need to see that," because she saw the way Lily had leapt into my arms. And that was not even a week. And prior to that, she's, in a shelter, and prior to that, she's on the streets, and prior to that, she's being dumped in a dumpster as a puppy. So,
My gosh.
so quickly did she learn to trust and bond with that one person that had shown her love.
Wow. And as you talk about that, and as we talked about in the past, I mean, it is such instructional wisdom when you think about it. I mean, our capacity to recover trust, well, I'll speak personally. I don't want to speak for others. My capacity to recover trust is really, really weak. I think I lived most of my life by the adage, once burnt, twice shy, maybe once burst, 10 shy. I don't, by nature, I don't think I forgive well. I wish I forgave better. And when you told me the story originally of the experience with the dogs, I tell you, it was powerful for me, because I thought to myself, what in the world, what in the world would allow an animal to have a greater capacity than a human, than I have, to actually move on, trust, forgive, figure out how to receive love and care and compassion, which is the very thing I think we're all looking for. Yet we sometimes push it all away. These dogs come, they're looking for care and compassion, and they become a recipient of it very quickly, which is very interesting. And I'd be interested to know, do you think that's normative? In your experience that you've had with your dogs and other people you've connected with, do you think this is a normative experience when dogs go through these experiences, or animals go through these experiences?
I mean, I only know the experiences that I've had, and they were all very unique, but they all came around eventually and quite quickly in the time that I spent with them. And I think if I compare it to the way that I even react to people who have wronged me, I think it's, I think there's a vulnerability in letting go that we just sometimes can't find in ourselves, and feels, it almost feels like we're being stronger by hanging on to it when the strength lies in actually letting it go.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I can't remember the saying, but I always think of it when I read somewhere that when we hold a grudge or hold anger towards someone else, it's like drinking poison. We're doing more damage to ourselves than
Yeah.
the person we're holding the grudge against, or the person that we're angry with, or I don't know. Like I said, I have a dog that still lives under the bed, so she's still hanging on to some stuff,
Sure.
but she, my gosh, leaps and bounds compared, like she wouldn't even make eye contact when we got her, and now her tail wags and she eats from our hands. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, I find it so fulfilling to see that, because it's a learning experience
It is.
for the
Yeah.
human being who gets to witness that and love them, and go beyond the fear that we talked about of adopting a rescue. There's a lot of fear in that, because what if it bites me? What if
Right.
it never goes in the backyard to the bathroom? All of these things, but they learn so quickly, and they want to please you so desperately that they will figure out what it is that you want from them.
Yeah, no, that's true. I have, I have we have two animals now. I have a cat and I have a dog, and my cat is I call my cat my therapy cat. My cat is the gift my wife gave me. So we never had a cat for a long time, and I wanted a cat years ago. When I have a real traumatic sort of attachment to cats, it's sort of weird. But when I was a kid, my parents were divorced around the time I was 5, and we had a cat that I remember when I was a kid, and all I remember with that cat is that when my dad left, the cat left. And the cat actually ran away. The cat didn't leave with my dad. The cat ran away. So I had this strange attachment in my child brain between my dad leaving and this cat leaving. And so my wife, who's a little bit allergic to cats, actually eventually let me get a cat. And the first cat we had, the cat's name was Jules, and it never meowed. We had it. It was a rescue. It was traumatized. It never meowed. We had it for the better part of probably 7, 8 years. It only started meowing like 5, 6 years after we got it. Never vocalized, never anything. Finally was my cat for sure. And then she got sick. She had a stroke and she died. And I remember being at the local vets with this cat in my hand, like literally blubbering like a child. And came home, and my wife was so gracious, because it was like, she said, I don't really want another cat, but I think you probably need another cat. And I'm like, yeah, I need another cat. So we go to adopt this cat, and we went to see this cat. And when we went, this other cat, as soon as we walked in this room, this other cat, he's like getting his thing on in the room. He comes up and boom, jumps right up. He's right there. And I'm like, okay, this is the one. So this is Manny. So we have Manny the cat, and he's awesome. But he hates children. And I have grandchildren, so that's a bit of a complicated thing, because he's not a kid cat, and he hisses at them and all the stuff that goes with that. He's got his own issues. Then we got Jackson, the cross between a dachshund and a chihuahua. And so he's angry on both sides of his personality. Like, he's an angry dachshund, he's an angry chihuahua, and we got him. He was 6 months old, not well cared for. In fact, when we first got him, and even to now, we've had him almost 8 years, and sometimes when I go to pat him on the head, he recoils still. So he's got some trauma in his life. He's got some things going on. And he also does not necessarily like children, because children are a little boisterous, so that becomes a whole problem. But my wife and I could not live without that little dog. It's like, you see these little memes where you got this dog-shaped heart, on these memes, little dogs in the heart.
Yeah.
This dog, gets right in your heart, and we love him to death. And there's something therapeutic for me in having animals. I think partly because of my past and different things, but also it's like this, as you said, this devotion and this commitment and this generous giving of affection, which is so wonderfully therapeutic and redemptive in some ways, for me at least.
Yeah, and I think we also talked about this previously as well, is that they don't take from you. You, I don't want to sound jaded, but in helping in constantly being that person who's constantly looking for opportunities to help that person that needs help,
Yep.
sometimes you feel exhausted from that
Yep.
and you can feel depleted, like you're
Yep.
just never receiving and they're always taking.
Yes.
You don't get that when you rescue an animal because they never take from you. They don't, there's no ill will with them. They just exist to bring you happiness and to please you. And it's the most rewarding relationship, especially when the animal, has some healing to do because you heal with them, but you receive this payback that it's like no other relationship you could possibly have.
No, it's crazy. So you got connected with this organization. Now, from what you said, the laws changed, so it would, if I'm understanding correctly, they know you can no longer bring dogs from foreign countries into Canada. Is that what?
No, yeah, you can't. So I'm no longer associated with that organization
Okay.
just because, I just don't foster with them anymore. I have so many animals and I'm traveling a lot now too, so I can't
Right.
really commit to it. But I do, and I'm not certain about this, I do think there's some kind of loophole that's happening right now where they're coming from other countries to the US and then the US to Canada. That's what I've heard, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah,
Because
I know.
if they end up in a shelter or something in the US, they can be brought here. I don't understand
Okay.
why, but
So it's a legit. I know my brother and his girlfriend. They adopted a dog from Jamaica. And again, a sort of street dog, not well cared for, and he came here, and this was a while ago, and his name's Jack as well, like our Jack, and this dog is like, first of all, when he came, like, men were verboten, hated men, like,
yeah,
you just
that's what
couldn't,
both my rescues are like.
oh yeah, it was not good at
Yeah.
all, but then all of a sudden, my brother just found a way and all that, and now that dog is my brother's dog. It's like,
Oh.
and this dog is just like the sweetest thing, and he just there's just so much affection in his heart, and he's been quite sick, and they've been having some challenges with him, but it's like they become like they're almost like your kids in a lot of way.
Oh, they are. Even more, yeah. I could talk about it forever. I could, but they are my children, and there's nothing better. There's nothing better than that feeling when they run to the door and
Yeah, and
they become dogs, right? Like they
yeah,
weren't dogs when you got them, or cats, or whatever your rescue was, but they
correct,
become them
yeah.
just through you, and it's so gratifying that you were a part of that.
No, it's so true. I always tell people if you want to figure out dogs, if you just spell the word backwards, everything starts to make sense. So
It's
there's
true.
something about animals in general and dogs maybe specifically, maybe even more than cats, because cats got
Yeah.
their own. I don't know. Cats got their own thing going on. I don't. You know.
But you're right. The worst part is saying goodbye. Like their lives are too short, and
They are.
it
Yeah.
is so traumatic.
It is difficult for sure.
Yeah.
So you're learning about yourself on this journey. You've got these dogs. You're learning about yourself. You're learning about the power of how trust can come and quickly, and forgiveness and all that. Is there anything else that you are learning about yourself along the way that you probably wouldn't be learning if you weren't rescuing some dogs and you don't have these animals as part of your house?
I think like the biggest lesson I've already described is that, it's so much easier to let go than we allow ourselves to believe, but also that we receive so much out of giving and out of taking care of others. Like it's just such a twofold relationship that I've had with these dogs. And in doing this, I've also opened up the door to people that I have bonded with who see the world the way I do with rescuing this especially this severely traumatized animals. Like this is beyond just being discarded. They were abused, they were torn apart, burned, hit, kicked, just brutalized. And so this is a whole other world of people out there who want that type of pet, who want to put the work in, who realize it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And so I've met a lot of amazing people as well. So it's kind of opened the door for me to see that I'm not the only weirdo who's looking for the worst case scenario and wants to, nurse them back to health. And I started doing all of this during the pandemic too, right?
Right.
So it was like there was already, all this like, I don't know, this like pent up, I need to get the hell out of this house. I need to focus on something other than Netflix. So it gave me a purpose at a time that I don't do well with. I mean, I can't imagine a zoo animal because I don't do well with being caged, that's for sure. So this was the whole thing kind of gave me an opportunity to bring these animals in and to focus on a different way of giving back other than the storytelling, which I love. And so, yeah, I mean, you reached out because all I did was spam it on my social media because I was so in love with the opportunity to bring these dogs in, and also the people who adopted them stayed, I'm on their social media. I can see the life these dogs are having, and it's so rewarding. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. So here's a question. I mean, one of the concerns I have around Christmas, and this episode's going to air just before Christmas, a lot of people want to get pets for their kids for Christmas, which can be problematic. And I mean, owning a pet's a lot of work. Owning a dog is a lot of work. I mean, they are like permanent toddlers in some ways.
I literally just said that like a week ago.
Yeah, they're needy. They're very needy, and it is a lot of work. And so again, if you're listening into this podcast and you're starting to say, man, this would be a great idea. I think I want a dog. I would say that's awesome, but you really got to also reflect on whether that's a good choice for you and your family, because the worst case scenario is that we get this idea that we're going to sort of, let's get a dog, and then we go, oh, I don't know, like, oh, no, we don't want it. Let's get a cat. Oh, we don't want it. Let's just take it back, And I there's something really that frustrates me about that sort of attitude. I mean, it is a commitment, and you never know quite what you're getting into, and every once in a while you have an animal that becomes difficult and maybe you can't deal with it. But at the same time, I think people really have to make prudent choices when it comes to these things.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I recently heard of the same thing happened during the pandemic, that everybody was getting dogs, and then suddenly the shelters were overwhelmed because people were returning to work and didn't have time for them anymore.
Yeah, no, it is a problem Now, if you're listening in, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. This is the crafty, sneaky thing I used on my wife to get my dog Jackson. So Jackson, the way we got Jackson, how we got Jackson is Jackson was a dog of somebody that my daughter worked with, and he was 6 months old, and they were having another baby. They already had a dog, and they felt they couldn't care for Jackson. Now, that was the story. I think actually Jackson was a difficult dog. There was probably problems. Of course, they don't tell you that. So what happened was my son and his wife decided to take Jackson. They already had a little dog, and they had a brand new baby. And within like 2 weeks, it was like, this is going to be too hard. So I said to my wife, and if you're looking for a sneaky way to get an animal in your home, this is what you should do. I said to my wife, hey, Pam, you know what? Let's take the dog for a test drive. Let's just take him for a weekend and see how we feel about it. Yeah, test drive. Let's test drive the dog. Well, speaking of the dog, look at that. If you're on the YouTube channel, what is that dog's name?
Lily.
Hey, Lily. Oh, that's a beautiful dog. Lily going to be a social media star now. I love it. You're on the YouTube channel. You just met Lily. So I said to my wife, let's take Jackson for a test drive. Well, once you get the dog test driving in your heart, hard to get it out. So if you want a sneaky way to get a dog, go with that. Let's just take it for a test drive. It worked for me.
Yeah.
Lily, you are an amazing looking creature, and you know your name. That is so awesome. What kind of dog is Lily?
They call it a Chinese dirt dog, so a street dog.
Wow.
Yeah, they I'm not really sure. They're just every kind of whatever that made it, and
whatever that made it. That's awesome.
So a couple weeks ago, my brother, you were talking about how they don't like men. She doesn't like men. And so my brother was over, and I did this. I picked her up, and I tried to make her sit with me while we were having a conversation, and she peed all over me.
Oh my God.
Just out of like fear, like because he was looking at her. She did not like him looking at her.
Oh my gosh.
Which is what she said.
I know. Right now, she's like, "Don't look into my eyes, Tim. Don't look
at
into
me.
my eyes.
I'm not here right now."
That is so awesome. How about you? Like, let me ask you. So you have some kids, and I don't know. Are they teenagers now?
Oh, yep. They're all teenagers now.
Okay. So how do the dog and the teenagers all make it work together? Do your kids love the dogs just as much as you? How's the teenager dog thing going?
Oh, adore them. And I mean, this dog is so lucky. Oh, don't jump down. Because she has 3 teenage girls.
Yeah.
Sorry, the last thing I want is for her to break a leg jumping
No,
off me.
don't want to do that.
So yeah, so I mean, there's always somebody home. There's always somebody eager to walk
Nice.
her, or hang out with her, whatever. Like, so they're just, it's actually great. It's great that I have 3 kids and 3 dogs.
Awesome.
They all kind of pick their person too, like they have their favorite. So
Yep. Yep. Well, you know, it's interesting. 2 years ago, we talked about this breaking our own fears and moving beyond that. And now we're talking about actually the fear that an animal comes into our home with, and the fear
Yeah.
that we have that we won't be able to help them, and the fear that they have. And it's interesting because the fears that we have as humans don't dissipate as quickly as the fears that dogs have and animals as they get cared for and loved, and there's that affection there that breaks the power of that cycle, which is really interesting. And so there's a bit of a connection to me between these conversations, because it's fear in those animals that actually often causes them at times to lash out. But when that fear starts dissipating, underneath that is just this wonderful, caring, compassionate sense of connection that you can have with an animal. And there is just, I mean, for millennia, obviously, there's been this bond between humans and animals, which is just so quite amazing. You hear these stories, of, these lions that are cubs, and then they go away, and eventually they come back and they find their owners, and it's like this deep bonding thing. So here's a question I have for you. If people wanted to rescue animals, what would be a couple of pieces of advice that you would give them based on your experience, regardless of where they were rescuing them from? What would your advice be to them if they said, hey, you know what, I want to rescue an animal? What advice would you give them?
I mean, if they've never had an animal before, or if they're familiar with having pets.
Oh, well, let's go with they have had pets but never a rescue.
Patience.
Patience.
And I mean, there were so many times, even when I was ill, like I had COVID while I was fostering the dogs. So they just, like, they didn't want to be alone. They kind of bonded with me because I was the one who was putting in the most work. So even sick, I had to lay with them and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, because one would bark and bark and bark and bark and bark if he didn't know where I was. So you, sick or not, that's your baby. And it is like having a newborn or a baby in the house. Like you have to be able to commit the time. And if you can't commit the time, then you should never, ever bring a rescue in your house, because it's even more so than owning a pet at all. It is much more time consuming, and you really have to pour yourself into it, or that dog is never going to bond with you.
Okay.
Or you with him.
That's great advice. And listen, if you're listening in, I'm going to stick some notes in the show notes of the podcast, some local rescue organizations in our area where we are. You can find a local rescue, I'm sure, in your area. There's lots of them around. And and again, I really, listen, you can go out and get a brand new puppy from a breeder. That's a great thing. No disparaging to people who do that. But there is something about giving the gift of a really great life to an animal that's already here and quite traumatized. And again, if you're going into Christmas, Christmas is this idea for us. It's got in its best place, because Christmas can be very difficult for lots of people. It's not a happy time for a lot of people. But the best part of Christmas is this idea. There's something about this idea that we can actually exchange and give gifts to one another that are of benefit to one another. And I would just suggest that you should ask yourself, can you be a gift? And maybe you're not going to rescue an animal. Maybe you're just going to start giving to your local humane society. Maybe you're going to pitch in and volunteer. Maybe you can do something. But animals are so powerful and interesting. I had a very powerful experience. I spent a lot of time in Africa doing leadership training and development work over the years. And I first started going to Mozambique. When I first started going, I want to say it was about 2015, 2016. There were still the effects of the Civil War that was still very much in the country. And the one thing which was interesting that I didn't realize is that you don't think about this, but during times of war, the main things that flee is animals, because they can flee, particularly birds. And it was interesting because the Mozambicans would say, oh, we know we're in a season of peace because the birds have returned and they're singing again. They actually looked to the animals as a harbinger to know whether peace was upon them. In times of strife and war, all the animals who had the ability to flee these borders where people couldn't, they leave. And so actually the presence of animals in African cultures or in any culture where there's war, what happens is the presence of animals is the sign of peace, which is a really fascinating way to look at it. And in our culture, when we think of Christmas, we think of peace on earth, goodwill towards men. And by the way, it's December 2023. We need a little peace on earth, goodwill towards all men right now. We got a lot of shit going on in the world right now. It's a cranky world. There's stuff going on. And we talk about this idea of peace on earth, and it's often this idea of this dove. It's an animal that is the symbol of this peace. Now, for those of you who might know, historically, that comes from a narrative story that may be a fable or may be truth. It depends on how you choose to look at it. But it's this idea that after a catastrophic event on the earth, there was a bird sent out to find land for them, and it was a bird that came back with a stick in its mouth because it found land. That's where this whole image comes from. And so there's something about the connection of peace, because animals who hear lots of bombing, war, they're just going to flee. So in fact, when animals, I think, want to reside with us, Natasha, I think that it is not only a sign of peace or the potential of peace, it actually brings peace. And there is something powerful about this. And at this season, I'd encourage you, if you're listening in, to think about this. How do we create such a peaceful environment in our world, in our worlds, in our homes, where animals want to be present with us, where animals don't cower in fear? Because frankly, if we can do that, then we're probably going to create an environment where humans aren't sitting in the corner and cowering in fear in our homes and our lives as well. Because you know what? We have to learn not only to treat our animals better, we got to treat each other better. And that is really important to me. Because I think so often we see, an animal, we see that fear in it, and we create it. And we also create that fear in other humans sometimes when we're not careful with each other. We can create tremendous damage. And we have to take responsibility for that and ultimately figure out how we care for people and care for our animals. I think it's a real sign of maturity and being a great human. When you can care for an animal well, there's something about you. When you can abuse an animal, there is something else about you, and that is a sign of something that is fundamentally fucked up in people's lives.
I have to say though that when I say it was rewarding to be able to be a part of the reinvention of these dogs who came in who'd never, I had to force them in the front door. Like I said, they were literally like paws on the sides of because don't bring me in there. I don't know what's going to happen to me. To have them come running in and excited to see me and on me on the couch and kissing me and loving me, you're right what you say about how that defines you as a person. When I'm the kind of person that really kind of lives for positive feedback and positive affirmation. I need that constantly. To know that I took an animal from that state to my shadow is so fulfilling, and it's a reassurance to yourself that I'm a decent person. I was able to do this.
Yeah.
I showed patience and kindness towards someone who was distraught coming through my front door. Yeah. And now maybe it's their time to leave me, which is also sad as a foster parent. But look what I did.
Yeah.
Look what I did I didn't want anything in return other than the gratification of seeing the evolution of this animal and its ability to, coexist in a household. That's all on me. I got to be that. I got to do that. I bawled my eyes out at every time they left. Everyone that left me, I barely slept that night. I cried so hard. Like grieving a death, I cried. But now looking back on it, what a rewarding experience that was. Because it is reassurance that I'm a decent freaking person.
Well, yeah, listen, and by the way, let's face it, animals are very smart, and they will suss out your character and nature very quickly. I believe that very strongly. And, at the end of the day, I guess the gift that they're giving you is they're affirming to you that, you know what, you are a kind-hearted person
Yeah.
who understands what it means to be cared for, what it means to be go through difficulty in your life, find freedom, find wholeness, figure it out, still be rather fucked up in the middle of that, like we all are, trying to find our journey. And when a dog or animal can come and come alongside you in that and affirm that, you know what, you're a really great person, and you can, if you can care for me in all of my difficulty, then you're a great human. And if that's the message we hear this year from our animals, that's what we ought to hear. So listen, take care of your pets. Be kind to your animals. Be kind to your friends. Be kind to people. The world needs some kindness right now. We are in, as I said, we're in a difficult situation in so many places of our society. So do me a favor. Go out and be kind, be gentle, be generous to others this season. And also be kind, gentle, and generous to your animals, because they choose to love you and they need you just like you need them. Thanks for listening. Have an excellent day and an excellent and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.